The Lord has shown me much about suffering, and many people see suffering as a curse, but it's not. It's a great blessing. Once I was taught another way to pray, which brought me closer to Christ in suffering, and it was a sign of the cross. Now, most people just make the sign of the cross, don't think anything of it, but it's a deeply spiritual prayer. And I was encouraged by the saints and our Blessed Mother that when I made the sign of the cross, to think of Christ suffering on the cross and to look to him on the cross. So I began to do this. Nothing happened. But then I asked the Holy Spirit, as our Blessed Mother said I should, to help me in this. And every time I start to make the sign of the cross, when I ask the Holy Spirit, I start to focus now on Jesus, on his suffering. And then one day I saw him on the cross suffering before me as I did this. And he reached out from the cross. I was a bit frightened. He lifted me up on the cross. I thought, oh. No. Anyway, he lifted me up onto the cross, and there was pain, there was suffering. But of course, it wasn't. It couldn't have been what Jesus suffered. It was just a minute part that I couldn't have endured that. But at the same time, there was intense ecstasy, because as he lifted me up on the cross, he showed me throughout eternity all the souls that would be saved by his suffering. He also showed me all the people that hurt him and how the pain was so intense that he carried, but through that he was joyful, he was happy because of the salvation of souls. And so he encouraged me that any time I suffer, or any time anyone suffers, instead of keeping it to self, you should look to Jesus on the cross and offer it to him. So I started to do that. Now sometimes the Lord gives me some suffering, and every time I suffer I look to Jesus now, I offer it to him, and I offer it to him for the salvation of others. And the Lord said what happens then is that you unite in his suffering, because in that offering of love for others, again, you're imitating Jesus.
Right.
In your suffering, you're looking to God, and you're then offering the suffering that you have to God for others, just as Jesus did in his life. He offered his suffering to the Father for all of mankind. So now, as you do this, and you reach out to Jesus in your suffering, he lifts your suffering up onto the cross with him. Then he pours out grace in abundance. He gives you the strength to carry your suffering. And he gives me great joy in my suffering. It's so good to feel that inside, the strength of his love touching your heart, even though you're in pain. And also at the same time, he allowed me to understand that as he draws your suffering up onto the cross with him, you unite in his act of salvation. And what a blessing that is. Oh. Because now you become part of the salvation of mankind in Jesus. And
that's right.
What more could you want? I mean, that's just wonderful.
That's right.
So suffering is a great blessing if you look and see what it truly is. When it becomes a curse is when you look to self and not to God. Because as you look to self, you keep the pain, the suffering within yourself. You become bitter, you become angry, resentful. You think, why isn't this person suffering? Why am I suffering? Why is God doing this to me? And instead of realising that God's giving you a grace where you can help others as Jesus helps others, you start to blame and get angry and bitter. Our Blessed Mother said to me once, it's when you can thank God for the crosses that you carry that you show you're worthy to carry them. So I thank God every time I get a cross, and then he gives me that strength to carry it. The problem is that most people don't thank God for the crosses. No. They blame him for them. So suffering, it's a wonderful blessing, and people think it's I shouldn't say things like, but it is. It's a great blessing. And when I see people suffering, and I see many who are dying and in terrible, terrible pain. When I see the ones who know Christ, they're a great joy to be with. They bring me so much peace. They teach me so much in their suffering, because you see Jesus in them. But then when you see the others who don't offer their suffering to Christ, who don't really know Christ, all they know is self and the world, even though they may think they know Christ, all you see is bitterness within them, and that's not joyful to